Hello, my internet friends. Welcome to Walking and Talking, the show where I walk and talk. Let me just wipe you off real quick. Right now I'm projecting a positive, confident, not articulate, but well enunciated image. Here I am. It's me. Your internet friend. Here to accompany you through 4 hours of life. I mean, imagine it. 4 hours where both of us will continuously have blood pumping through our veins, coursing through our veins, even. And we'll have thousands of heart palpitations. We'll take, I don't know how many breaths, probably thousands of breaths. And who knows how many synaptic firings, probably millions or billions or something like that. All of these things and more will be occurring in concert with each other, in consort with each other, in order to maintain the precarious continuity of our corporal being. Or is it corporeal? And not only will we stay alive, most likely, most of us, you will be able to understand what I'm saying, for the most part, I think. Through this media. I'll be saying things and you'll be able to understand what I'm saying. It's amazing. Excuse me. I just have to pick my nose. It's happening already. Here we are, living. Even that is quite astounding. Think of how much time there was before you were born, and how much time there will be after you were born. After you die, rather. Compared to how much time exists in between your birth and your death. It's an infinitesimally small amount of time. But just by happenstance, here we are, occupying that same infinitesimally small amount of time, both happening to be alive and able to communicate. What should we do with this impossibly rare life that we have? Well, I know what I'm doing. Do you ever get frustrated when you're walking and somebody else is walking at the exact same pace as you, and so you can't get away from them? And so you speed up or slow down? But then, you know, why is it, if it's so exceedingly rare to be alive, it's, you know, so incredibly unlikely, then why is it that we're here living and perceiving things and moving through our life? If it's so wildly improbable, you know? Like, it's got to be on a scale of many billion. It's like one, you know, the ratio of our lifetime to the span of time, assuming the Big Bang theory is true, and that at some time we have the big crunch. Either that or the like stasis heat death of the universe. Either way, I think time effectively ends at some point. But the ratio would be like something like 1 to many billions at least, if not trillions. So why is it that I'm alive now and you're alive now, and we're not either not born yet or already dead? I don't understand it. I mean, it has to have something to do with that. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to perceive, we wouldn't be able to know, we wouldn't be able to identify ourselves, we wouldn't have the consciousness, we wouldn't have this specific consciousness to say, I'm alive, this is my life. But still, it does really seem like time is passing, you know? Like we can remember the past, right? And I know that I'm so many years old. I'm 34 years old. So I've lived that many years, which is a lot of days, and I keep growing older and passing forward through time until I'll inevitably die, right?
Sarah.
So if it's like, if I'm confused. Like, it definitely seems like my life is passing by. Like I'm moving through my life from birth to death. There's a linear feeling of time going on. But if it is our specific consciousness is that are somehow tying us to this present experience of being alive, of perceiving, then why is it that we would still feel this passage of time? I don't know if I'm not quite able to articulate this right. But you know, it's incredibly unlikely that this experience of all of us being alive right at this moment is pure luck, you know? I can't be attributed just to pure probability that none of us happen to be not born yet or already dead. Or is it? And so, yeah, of course, if we weren't born yet or if we were already dead, we wouldn't be here to observe our non-existence. So in that sense, I'm looking at a bunch of dead worms, like floating around in that water. They're like stuck to the bottom. Just a pile of dead worms. They're no longer around to observe their own sentience. If sentience is an appropriate word for an earthworm, I'm not sure. Maybe not. So in the sense that before birth and after death, we're not around to talk about our own existence, or to observe it, to experience it. To witness ourselves, or anything else for that matter. Excuse me. Then in effect, it's as if there's something eternal about this life. You know what I'm saying? There's something, it's as if there must be something eternal about this consciousness that we are occupying now. Like, it's as if, you know, logically, in the linear sense of time, it only happens to be right now. But in light of the fact that there's no, there wouldn't be a consciousness outside of it, or at least there wouldn't be this consciousness outside of it. It's like there is actually something eternal about now, about our consciousness, about being alive. Does this make any sense to you? It only barely makes sense to me. I can barely even wrap my head around this. I'm trying. And so think about also not only how improbable it is that you and I are alive at the same time, how improbable, I mean, assuming you're not watching this like at some point after I've died, which is possible. But regardless of that, how improbable is it that you're hearing this right now, that we're having this conversation? not conversation, monologue, whatever, that this communication is happening? How improbable is it that you're doing this right now, that you're having this experience exactly? I guess in some ways it's just not, in some ways it's completely mundane, because everything is equally improbable, and we just don't think about it. It's only the fact that I'm calling to attention the improbability of this particular instance that we should even think to consider it. It's like this is kind of like stumping me almost. It's hard to talk about. It's making me want to stop talking. It's actually making me want to stop thinking. I just feel a little bit stuck on like, why this experience right now? Out of all the possible configurations of the universe, why this one? And it sounds kind of dumb, because of course, why not? Why not? Maybe it is the case that our self-perceived specialness, uniqueness, is actually a result of our perspective. That is, we are humans, and we can observe something very unique about that. So for instance, the human brain, I said this before, I believe, is the most complex piece of matter that we know of in the universe. And so that's like outstandingly unique. And we say that we humans are the most intelligent beings that we are aware of in the universe, and that's also exceedingly rare. Why would that just happen to be the case? Out of luck? All these things would be just too improbable to attribute to just luck, right? But perhaps it is the nature of our intelligence, the specific quality of our perception and our intelligence that causes us to see ourselves as the most intelligent. Like it's a specific configuration of brain that is actually able to perceive itself. Or mind, maybe I should say. Because the brain can't actually perceive itself. The brain as a piece of matter. You can never actually see your own brain or even sense it, really. Only you can sense what comes into your sensory organs, and you can experience thought. You can experience mind. But you can't actually experience the physical matter of your own brain. You just kind of know that it's up there in your skull due to inference, you know, having seen medical textbook pictures since you were young. It could be a grand conspiracy that we have a brain at all. It's like the flat earth theory. Maybe actually there's just this huge conspiracy out there just to convince you that you have a brain inside your skull. And actually you have actually there's just I don't know, a bunch of rubber in there or something. Or a black hole. I mean, so I say that the brain is the most complex piece of matter that we know of. So how do we gauge complexity? You know, complexity would have to do with perceiving patterns, repetition and difference. And perhaps it is the case that that is actually a construction of our mind. That is complexity itself is maybe an artifact of our own perception and comprehension. Like, for example, it might be dependent on the scale that we can perceive. For instance, maybe if you were looking at some piece of matter that appears homogeneous. Like let's say like a piece of granite from afar. Let's say you're looking at a piece of granite from afar, just a huge rock, and it doesn't look that complex. It's just a rock. It's just like one thing that you can kind of you can easily wrap your head around and kind of surmise in your perception of it. Then if you get really close to it and look at the fine-grained detail, there's lots of complexity in the granite. It's like an amalgamation of all these different minerals and swirls of different minerals, and lots of crystalline structures in it. And if you at the right scale, it's enormously complex and would contain enormous amounts of information, you could say, or it would require enormous amounts of information to describe it at a certain scale. But then let's say if you zoom in even further to the point where you're just like seeing a few molecules, then at that point it becomes very simple again. You just have some molecules, and like they could be described in very simple terms. So it seems to me that complexity itself is not a objective or inherent quality in terms of like scientific materialism or physical materialism. That is, without the observer, complexity has no meaning. There is no complexity. Without the mind to perceive it. Complexity, and therefore complexity is really a function of perception and comprehension. And in that sense, it is like a mirror of our mind. And when you think about it that way, it's not so surprising that in our measure of complexity, it's the own human brain that comes out as the most complex of material objects. And also, perhaps not surprising if to say that if we were to judge what is the most complex form of consciousness that we are aware of, it would again be the human mind. It would be the human experience. The human experience, as far as we are aware of, is more complex than any other, than the experience of any other life form that we are aware of. And sure, I'm sure that like dogs and other animals also have very complex experiences, but you can kind of demonstrate that the human experience has additional layers of complexity on top of that of other animals and other life forms. Just in terms of like, we have like sensation, perception, conception, and all these very abstract thoughts that other animals lack. And so again, I'm saying that this is actually less anthropocentric than it sounds. In fact, it's quite the opposite, in that, in a way, I am describing that our conception, even our perception of the entire world is almost necessarily anthropocentric. It is centered around our own experience necessarily, in that what we can perceive is kind of a mirror of our capability of perception in the first place. I'm not sure if this battery is gonna last. It's like starting to lose its ability to hold a charge. Not very well made, if you ask me. But I'm feeling interested in what I'm saying so far, so it's like, if the battery runs out in this episode, I might have to post it anyways, even though it's might be short. But anyhow, this is kind of like, I guess I'm starting to get at why it is that it seems like we are so rare as humans, and why our experience seems so rare and so unique in all the universe. And then, like, beyond that, maybe we can start to get to like more the individual level and more of the immediate experience level. Like, why specifically am I me? Why are you specifically you? And why are we experiencing specifically this moment as opposed to some other moment that has existed in the past or will exist in the future? But I wanted to continue a little bit about this anthropocentrism and why, and I mean this in a deeper sense than the just like typical sense that like of like humans thinking they're more important than animals, or humans thinking they're more important than other life forms or something. I mean this in actually a much more fundamental sense. Of like why does the human experience, why is the human experience paramount in our experience? And in some ways this is kind of a tautology, in that it is paramount because it is our experience. It's like saying, like, it's kind of like saying, like, you're here because you're here, or you're you because you're you. Or it's actually similar to saying that, why do I happen to be alive right now? Because if I weren't born, and if I were already dead, then I wouldn't be here to say that I'm not alive. And so it's similar to being like, why do we have this human experience and not the trees experience? Because if we had the trees experience, we would have the trees experience. And I can be pretty sure that whatever the experience of a tree might be, if it has something that of an experience at all, which I personally believe, like, that, you know, there's in some ways a kind of hierarchy, not a value hierarchy, but a hierarchy between what we can call an experience and what we can call not experience, or a hierarchy between, like, complexity of consciousness. Now, granted, there's that dude. Granted, I'm still relying on my own, you know, self-centric conception of what complexity of consciousness is. You know, I can only base that upon my own experience of consciousness. I can only use my own consciousness and my own experience to even conceptualize of such things as other consciousnesses or other experiences. So, granted that, I do believe that there's a hierarchy of complexity of consciousness that, you know, that we are at the top of, as far as we know. And then, like, then there are all these other slightly, you know, animals with less complex brains. You got dolphins, you got other primates, and you got other mammals like dogs and cats, and it gets simpler and simpler, and you get down to reptiles, and then invertebrates, and then you know, you have something very small like a mosquito or even a single-celled organism. And so what that organism would be capable of in terms of an experience would be much less complex And then at some point there's this question of there is this like fuzzy line between whether something is alive or not. You know, you have like viruses, there are certain viruses that seem like they are borderline, it's kind of borderline whether they're actually alive or if they're just inanimate molecules. And then you have plainly inanimate matter like rocks and so forth. And so let's see, I was getting something about like, you know, why do I have this experience and not the tree's experience? And so let like if we try to imagine the experience of, say, a tree, we of course have to admit that it's like vastly different from our own. And I mean, so much so that we can't really comprehend it. But we can assume that the experience of a tree, you know, would not have anything resembling the same like value system that we have, or you know, it wouldn't even be, I don't think it would be even capable of holding something we would consider a value, you know, a value like it's questionable whether a tree has conception, you know, can hold a concept. It seems pretty unlikely. They don't have a nervous system per se. I guess there seems to be some evidence that plants do have some form of perception that we don't understand very well at all. And even there seems to be some like research about them being able to have form memories and such, and to communicate with each other. But this is all to say that the experience of plants, or the consciousness of plants, as far as we know, we can only really say that it's fundamentally and vastly different from the human experience and human consciousness. I mean, I do actually believe that there is something fundamental to consciousness that is equal between humans and animals and plants and actually all of matter, all of existence. But I'll maybe get to that later. But for now, we're saying that plant experience is fundamentally different from our own. And it probably is nothing like the way that we perceive a plant. Even if a plant does have its own forms of perception, I would have to imagine that that perception is something entirely different from our perception of plants. So as humans, very many of us have a concern for other life forms. Although I would say that we still have concern for other humans first and foremost. It's exceedingly rare that people genuinely place the welfare of other animals and beings and life forms above the welfare of other humans. I mean, there may be a few cases, but it's exceedingly rare. And you know, many of us have some concern about the biosphere as a whole, and for many of us that might be linked to our concern for the human species. You know, like maintaining the biosphere may be, for many of us, important primarily because it sustains humans, and if we threaten the stability of the biosphere, then we threaten the stability of ourselves. I would say that that is probably the main motivating factor. And also for many people, they may be concerned about the biosphere for its own sake as well. Trying to extend to it a certain innate value apart from the service of humans. But when it comes down to it, given the choice between like killing a person and chopping down a tree, it's clear what almost any of us would choose. And maybe it depends on your relationship to that particular human. Maybe if it was an evil human, you would say kill that evil human and save the tree. But evil implies that that person is malevolent or dangerous to other humans, and so you're still in that case valuing human life on the whole. But I had another little tangent that I wanted to go on. Which is, throughout human history, we have, it's about this anthropocentrism. Throughout human history, we have maintained this. And, you know, it makes sense. Like, you know, it's only in recent history that our knowledge of astronomy has gotten so vast, and that we're actually able to get somewhat of a grip on how big the universe is and how old it is. And in times past, we had a different worldview. You know, we thought that the planet Earth was the center of the universe around which everything revolves, which, like, of course, of course you would think that. Like, you look up in the sky and you see everything, you see the stars turning around you. So, like, why would you not think that the world is the center of the universe? And, like, it's the base of your perception. It's like the place that you're looking from, you know? It's like being a person. Like, here I am as you know, I'm looking out of here, this body. Like, if I didn't know any better, like, I mean, like, this is essentially the center of my experience, and like your body is like the center of your experience. So it's like wherever experience exists, it is centered there. So, like, you have like another animal, like a wolf. Like, a wolf cares about itself first, then it cares about its family. It doesn't really care about, you know, its prey. It doesn't really care about humans. Well, I guess until it got domesticated. It's like all experience is centered in itself. And, you know, we had that's why we have these like kind of widening circles of affinity, you know, like, as a person, you're gonna take care of your own needs first, and then like maybe your immediate family, and then maybe your extended family, and then if your extended family seems to be doing all right, then maybe you care about your neighbors and your neighborhood, and like historically we have had these like tribal and ethnic groups that are tightly bound in this affinity group, and you know, we'll fight against another ethnic group or tribe in its own self-interest. And we still have some of that going on today with racism and so on. And in a way, that's similar. That's another effect of, you know, like, of the limitation of our consciousness being centered where it is. As evolution goes forward, and I don't just mean biological evolution, but also a cultural evolution, and the widening circle of affinity can extend to, you know, the whole human race, hopefully, and then the whole biosphere, and then maybe to all of matter. So, I mean, it's really interesting to talk about me as a human being having the consciousness of a human being centered here in my body, because my body is actually incredibly complex, and it's an incredibly complex arrangement of all of these cells and organisms that previously in evolutionary history were just like autonomous little things. You know, life started off with single-celled organisms, and that was the height of consciousness. You know, that was the most complex arrangement of matter and the most complex experience, at least, you know, from our current perspective. From our current perspective of that time period in the past. So you know, you had these individual cells essentially competing against each other. The way that individual humans compete against each other. And then at some point they joined, that, you know, cells started cooperating, joining together in, you know, physically joining together. And then you have this multicellular organism, and like, so it's like whatever remnants of consciousness existed in those individual cells merged. It merged into a singular consciousness of a multicellular organism, which became increasingly complex, and its consciousness became increasingly complex. And now we have humans, to some extent competing against each other with our individual consciousnesses, but in other ways cooperating with each other and communicating very closely in these very complex social and economic networks. Which can be viewed as the beginnings of a superorganism. And with the internet being maybe the most sophisticated example of the network between humans, the interlinkage that would fuse our consciousness, our individual consciousnesses together into a superorganism that is no longer a bunch of parts competing against each other, but this grand consciousness that is, you know, is kind of like centered in the whole human world. And that would imply you know, hopefully the end of this like tribalism, ethnic conflict, racism and bigotry, etc. It almost seems like that could be a whole episode. I feel like I could stop there. Or I could go on forever. I feel like that would be a pretty decent hour. I guess all of that kind of sprang from this question of like, why am I here now? And why are you here now? And it's kind of like we are here now as who we are due to the ability of our consciousnesses to perceive reality. It's as if it's I almost feel like the form in which we exist is kind of like dependent on the scope of our consciousnesses to like to perceive and to identify. I mean, right, like if I like say I was like a less sophisticated and worldly gentleman, and I just like didn't understand much about the rest of the world. I'd never been very far. It's like my worldview would be more limited. I mean, I wouldn't perceive it as being limited necessarily. But like, it's like whatever I knew, I could only see myself in context in relation to what I knew. And what I knew would be the only thing that I could ponder about how and why it came into existence. And so, you know, like animistic worldviews like make a lot of sense if you haven't been exposed to anything else. The animistic worldview being like worldviews in which we can change reality by our own thinking, by magic, essentially. Where like it's almost as if like I as an individual gaining a certain kind of power, or like being in a way a center of the world, in that I would believe that I would have the power to change reality by my thoughts. And then you know, to have like the a mythic worldview where you imagine a human-like god or group of gods that are omnipotent and control everything. It's like that's again sort of a worldview that is a reflection of our own consciousness and experience. Like of course we would think that the omnipotent power was like ourselves, because of this experience is what we have to perceive the world, and it's the most complex thing we know. It's like, yeah, our experience is the most complex thing that we know, because it's our whole mode of knowing. And now I would venture to say that the newer, like, scientific, rational worldview is again a reflection of our experience, a reflection of the human experience, and that I actually think that our conception of the laws of physics and so forth are reflections of the structure of human experience. And let me see if I can try to back that up a little bit. But, like, for example, what I was talking about earlier about complexity and why is it that we perceive the human brain as being the most complex piece of matter in existence, and what follows from that is that the notion of complexity, while at first you might think it to be an objective measurable attribute of physical matter, is actually dependent on perception, and specifically human perception. That is, like, complexity in the terms that we humans have defined it. And I also think that would apply to all the other laws of nature that we have described through science. That they are all reflective of human consciousness, in that our perception is actually an integral part of the existence of any of those laws of nature, and that becomes kind of clearly true in quantum physics. Like, we broke things down so far where we got to this conundrum where observation seemed to actually determine the existence of a particle, or the location of a particle. It's like at the core of all existence. It's like even in quantum physics, consciousness is creating the material world. Oh man, I'm afraid my battery's gonna run out. This hunk of junk from Best Buy, don't buy this Insignia brand external battery pack from Best Buy. I'm gonna try to return this thing, so I've only had it a few months. I've only had it like since May. I've only filmed a few episodes with it. What gives? Maybe I have to post a short episode. Would that be kind of a bummer? Does it break my rules? Ah, I feel so bad about it. I'm gonna feel so bad if I have to post a short episode. But I like the content. It'll be a good episode despite its shortness. It's like not really endurance based, but I feel like it explains some stuff. But like this you know, this notion of quantum physics of consciousness actually determining the physical world isn't something that's unique to Western science, even. Oh, big fly. Even well before the advent of that, there were mystics saying the same thing. Like read Ramana Maharshi. He's not even the oldest, you know, there's ones far before him. So we've come a long way from starting off asking this question of why is it the case that you and I happen to be alive right now? And then we can also ask, like, okay, why am I experiencing this moment exactly right now? Out of all the possible moments I could experience. I mean, it's on one hand a silly question to ask, because it's like, why not? All the moments are equally improbable. And so, like, what is the specific nature of this moment exactly? Well, one thing really interesting about the quality of this moment is actually the fact that we are asking about the quality of this moment. The fact that we are asking why this specific moment, in this moment. It's a reflexive kind of moment. It's like a moment that's looking at itself. And something about that, for me, makes this moment feel special. This moment feels unique to me. It feels somehow expansive, exalted. Something eternal about it, even. But why this moment exactly? Because this is the moment in which we perceive. This is the moment that we perceive the moment. It's the moment that we perceive our own perception. All those other moments in our life, we're worrying about other shit. We're worrying about love, worrying about money, worrying about lunch, stressing out about work. Watching a movie. Driving our car. Whatever. But this is the moment where we actually really inquire deeply into the nature of this moment, and we try to perceive our perception. You know, we ask ourselves about our perception, we ask ourselves about the nature of our consciousness, and that's why it feels special, and that's why it feels like unique and improbable right now. And the thing about this moment is, when you have it, it doesn't really matter how long it took to get here. I think maybe it was Jonathan Richman or somebody, that songwriter. I think he said in a song that once you find love, it doesn't matter how long it took you to find it. Or it doesn't matter that it took so long to find it. And that's what I would say about happiness. And I would say that about enlightenment. And just we can even like skip that term and just say, like, forget about enlightenment and just say like understanding the understanding of like what time and experience and consciousness is. When you're having that, and you know, you can have that to varying degrees and in various ways. And for various durations or whatever. When you have it, it doesn't matter how long it took you to get there. That's like being alive right now. You and I are alive, and it doesn't matter how much time there was before we were alive. And it doesn't matter how much time exists after we die. That's, you know, that's the answer. Like, this question of like, we're alive now for this fleetingly short moment in comparison to the vast expanse of time before we were born and the vast expanse of time after we're dead. And why is it we're alive now? Well, it doesn't matter how much time existed before we were born, and it doesn't matter how much time exists after we die, in terms of like it doesn't matter as far as life is concerned, as far as this experience of being alive is concerned. Because in a vacuum of consciousness, whatever consciousness exists, in a sense, expands to fill all of existence. Like, we can say on one hand that there is existence outside of our experience, but on the other hand that in its you know, escape beyond our experience, it's like our experience expands to fill all of what is. And you hear me saying this, but like, you know, ask this of yourself. Ask this of your experience. Like, what exists outside of your experience? Spatially? Temporally? You can think of things, of course. We can conceive of the past and the future, and we can conceive of space outside of what we can immediately sense. And yes, it does tend, our mental models will tend to often correspond to our, you know, when we move to another place and we have a memory of that place, it will probably line up more or less. But what exists outside of your experience of right here and now, you know? You can be somewhere else later. You were somewhere else before, but you are here now. You're not those other places. And so it's like those things exist. You know, that the time and space outside of your experience exists like to the extent that like to the extent that the world exists without consciousness. And that's like actually like not at all. You know, without the observation of the particle, it's like it's just an indefinite, you know, it lacks substance. It lacks actual materiality. And so, like, I can conceive of the past before I was born in terms of history and in terms of, you know, hearing what older people tell me about the past before I was born. And so as far as my experience is concerned, the past can exist in that type of mental model, the history within my experience. I mean, this is starting to sound a little bit like solipsism, but it's not like it's like a universal sort of solipsism, where the you know, the center of consciousness is not like one person and everything else that exists is imaginary, but the center of consciousness is everywhere. Everywhere consciousness is dreaming up itself. And every point of consciousness is kind of mirroring reality based on itself. The paramecium experience, you know, the paramecium creates reality in paramecium terms. The tree creates reality in tree terms, and the human creates reality in human terms. Like the rock creates reality in rock terms. And some interconnected global organism, which we are only beginning to be able to perceive, dreams up reality on its terms. I think this video is I'm hoping a start to that, a contribution. It's a type of communication that has the potential to fuse consciousnesses to some degree. I mean, at least in terms of these thoughts, like it is fusing our thoughts. Just the act of you hearing this and listening to it and understanding. At least I hope you understand at least a little bit. I'd love to hear from you if you understand this at least a little bit. I would love it if you left a comment indicating the degree to which you feel like you understand what I'm saying. I again feel like this could be enough already, like I could end this video. I feel now like just kind of given a little space